He's loading.
All right. I love it.
Yeah, because I got my glass. Oh, I can't. I got my glass, and then I've got my little refill here.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. That's brilliant. Cool. Well, welcome to episode 266 of the Artcasters. And as usual, we have a special guest this week. Before we get into introductions and all that fun stuff, we'll just do the go around and kind of let everybody know where to find us. So hang on a sec. Sorry. I'm Joshua Kemble. You're on my channel. So if you haven't yet, hit subscribe, hit the bell, all that fun stuff, so you get notifications when this is about to go live. I also do a lot of live streams and stuff on this channel now, like almost nightly. So it's fun. It's a fun way for artists to like hang out and stuff. So if you hit the bell and subscribe, it'll let you know when that's about to happen. I hear there's like options on the bell. Have you heard of that, Scott? Like,
so I heard somebody say that, but I haven't looked into it.
I don't know. But anyhow, pick whatever option suits you, all that fun stuff. And then I would also recommend everybody go to YouTube. Oh my goodness. Go to Amazon and pick up a copy of 2 stories. And it's, yeah.
I
so
feel bad because mine's not
what's this?
reach.
What is going on?
Oh my gosh. It's all
I usually have all those comics on my desk.
Nearby.
Actually, I think Josh is downstairs, and then Gary's is in the other room right there. I could go get it, but
My stack of Young and the Dead is like hidden on my art table, so it's like somewhere over here.
This
So,
is
all right.
actually my next one to finish, so I can write a review for you on Amazon, which I would encourage everybody else to do too, because it helps him if there's some.
yeah, I've done it.
Thank you. Well, thanks for picking it up, and I hope you dig it.
Oh, I'm sure I will. I know I will. I was reading it as you were making it, so.
Oh, that's just as true. All right. Well, Scott, where can everybody find your work? Where can they find Young and the Dead?
Well, you can find. I have one thing to promote this week, and you can find that at circworks.com, and it is Young and the Dead, but it isn't my work. It is Josh's work. So I've added these prints. This was Josh's birthday present to me, along with the original, which is amazing. I should have brought that to show you, but Josh put a process video up. So this print right here is very limited. I think he sent me 10 of them, and I kept a couple for myself. I gave one to the comic book store owner. And so I think there's like 5 on my website, and that's going to be the end of it. If it ever gets reprinted again, it'll be different because there is like a small little error which no one will notice. But
Gary's actually the one who noticed.
But here's the thing: if you know anything about like collecting or whatever, anytime that there's something wrong with something or an error like that, those could be big money, and it's really I wouldn't let that deter you from purchasing this, because like I said, I didn't notice. My girlfriend, who's like a grammar nut, she didn't notice until I pointed it out. So, but anyway, it's really, I mean, definitely check this out. It's on my and Josh, he very charitably gave me this and said that I could sell them on my website. So so they're up there now. So, and like I said, there's very limited quantity. So if you want one, if you want to see how Josh handles Young and the Dead, this is it. So definitely check that out at circworks.com.
Awesome.
I love the EC throwback. I'm such a geek for that kind of era of comics, so I was really excited when I saw it.
Yeah, and actually, interestingly enough, there's an EC throwback variation of 1975, isn't there?
There is
a
little bit. There is a variant. If you're allowing me to, So this is the let's see here. Here's the original cover of 75. This is the pulp variant, limited edition. Once it sells out, I'm never reprinting this. Never, ever, ever. So, like, yes, if you want collectible comics, now's the time to move on it. So, I think I have my latest one, 97. For sale right now, and I think we're down to like 8 copies of this. When this sells out, then I will be doing a kind of EC pulp version of 97. So
Awesome.
maybe more reason to buy another one of these just to use them all up so I can get that pulp one out. But
I love it.
I still have my information. If I should have, you didn't. Somebody
no,
put
it's
Gary's
fine.
information in here.
Pitching. Yeah, like I just got an opening there.
Oh, sorry. I should actually add. Let me add your brand. It is in the show notes too.
Is it?
Wow. Yes. That's just my bad though. Let me get that in there. While I get that in there though, Gary, why don't you let everyone know where to find you, like on Instagram and that kind of stuff as well.
So like the easiest way to find me, because it'll link to everything else, is on Instagram. It's Dinosaurs versus Marsbots. Dinosaurs vs Marsbots. I'm a indie comic creator. I write and draw my own comic series. It's an anthology series. It's like a sci-fi horror kind of pulpy comic about a top secret war that you didn't even know had taken place between the 70s and the early 2000s. And it involved an attempted alien invasion and our kind of fascinating way we fought it off. But yeah, if you would like go to my Instagram, that will link you to my YouTube, where I do a bunch of videos about the process of making comics, talk about writing, talk about drawing, talk about printing. And then my Etsy shop if you want to pick up a copy.
All right. And I have added a banner for your Instagram and for your Etsy. So there's where you can find it. And there's where you can find that. And my apologies for being a terrible host.
Totally fine.
All right. So one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you was just like when, we talk to you, of course, like whenever you have a new book coming out and all that. But especially in the process of looking through 1997, it reminded me that, and you did this in 1975 too, where it's like there's these just beautiful moments of like patience and like timing that are done with paneling, where it's sometimes like a repeated panel with like subtle movements, and it really creates this like sense of like suspense and also like building tension and really like a narrative interest. I think when like kind of reading through it, it's very captivating and it kind of brings you into the story and sort of forces you as a reader to like be in there with it. Like there's moments where it almost feels like you're in like there's a police station sequence where it's like you feel like you're actually in the police station kind of observing. And I can't help but think that's like totally intentional. And being somebody who likes playing with pacing and timing and kind of stretching things out, it's like that requires a lot of thought and pre-thinking and stuff. So I thought it would be cool to hear kind of your thoughts on pacing and paneling and sort of what goes into sort of from the script phase, like how do you kind of go about like breaking down your paneling and thinking about like timing and pacing?
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you so much for those compliments. That's really nice. It is intense. It's intentional. It's something I spend a lot of time on in the planning. My process is basically I write my comics in screenplay format. So it just looks like a movie script when I'm done. And then once that's done, I go through it basically with like a red pen, and I just try and work out very roughly like how this would convert into panels. Like what do I think these panels will be? And that's probably where the time and pace element comes into it. I don't know where this comes from, but I think a lot about managing the reader's experience a little bit, like curating a little bit. Like when do I want the reader reading fast? Like when do I want to like really hit the gas on it? And when do I want to let off and make the reader slow down? And I think the only way to really do that is like choosing it's like panel sizes and how much is in each panel and what you're showing. Like you can't expect them to read it in the pace you're hearing it in your head. You've got to try and either, you just got to figure out how to like slow them down or speed them up. It's something, I guess I didn't think about it so much. I think about stories in a very cinematic way, like my comic stories. And in movies, like there are quiet moments, there are pauses, there are moments like room for like everyone just to kind of take in what's happening. And I think that's just something that comes to me when I'm paneling something out. I think Dan Ekus was the first person who observed that about V versus 775, that he liked. One of his favorite little moments was there are two guys in a car and they're listening for something. And there's just like a panel where you see them both like in this kind of like this kind of like, they're just that moment where you're trying to hear something that's a little far away. He's like, I just love that because you don't usually see that in comics. You don't usually see a panel where nothing is really happening, where they're just like sitting there and being still.
Yeah.
And I just love those moments. And I think those are a good way to slow the reader down, to make them stop a little bit. And I like those. I like playing with time in that way where I'm not a fan of repeated panels where you're just copying and pasting. It's like a pet peeve of mine. But I do like panels that are very, very, very similar.
Yes.
But you're changing a little thing, just showing like a little thing has like, you know, the equivalent of like a desert scene with a tumbleweed going by.
Yeah.
You know, like where, that's the only thing you're changing. I've never done that in a comic, but I like that idea. I like the idea of just like stopping the reader, slowing them down, letting them making them kind of meet your pace of the storytelling.
Yeah.
I think size is an element of pace too, where you'll see some panels in my comics where if I'm trying to show like a very quick sequence of events, like this happened, then this, it'll be very small panels side by side, one after another, you know, where I think size sometimes invites a reader. I think it suggests how much time to spend reading it, if that makes sense. So a little panel, there's something about it where like you feel like you can fly through that. And I think knowing that, you should consider that if you're trying to figure out like how fast or slow do I want the reader going through this story right now. You know, like maybe you could get away with a small panel, but you shouldn't because you need them to be going at a slower pace or vice versa.
Yeah.
I threw a lot of different ideas out there, but like that, I was just sort of free associating things.
No, I love that. One of the things you brought up is something I've been really fascinated with, which is like the idea of like comic paneling, almost like music notes, where it's like, you know, like if you read sheet music, like the way the notes appear kind of signifies the timing for how it'll be played. And in a weird way, I really do believe that when you're kind of directing somebody through a page, like you have this wonderful level of control over where you can guide their eye. And the cool thing about comics that you don't have in film is it's like it's a buddy system. So it's like it's not necessarily going to go exactly as you structure it, no matter how well you structure it.
Yeah.
Because people have control over the time themselves.
Yeah.
And also because it's a book, like way more often than a film, like they're going to be, you know, like getting to a page, maybe putting a bookmark in and like getting a cup of coffee or whatever.
Oh, crazy thing. I remember I was at a con and someone picked up my book and did this. They were like, oh, cool. I was making my pitch and they're like, oh, cool. And I don't know if you can see what I'm doing, from back to front, they start flipping through it. I almost wanted to slap it out of their hands. It was like, what are you doing? Like, you're seeing all this stuff that you're like, no. Front to back, man. Like, what are you doing? Yeah.
I've seen people do that. I don't know why. That's weird.
Yeah.
It's very weird. Because I think some people, they just, I don't know, they read spoilers on the internet. They don't care. Like, but for me, I'm really thinking about that. I'm really thinking about, no, we're going to read it this way. And not only that, I was just having this conversation with the Crimson Owl guys. You know, comics, it's all storytelling, sure. But like comics aren't movies, comics aren't books, comics aren't paintings, comics aren't songs, comics are comics. And I think part of being, and I'm not claiming to be the best or even good, but like if you want to be a great comic storyteller, you have to embrace the physicality of the book. Like you have to think about how are people reading it? Like, you know, they're starting here and they're working down here. And you got to think about page turns, and you got to think about the sizes of panels and how much text, and like this is the art. Like you know, this is what we're doing. You know, like you need to think about that stuff.
That's kind of it. Surprised me. It surprised me when you said how you like your comics to be a little more cinematic, because I wouldn't have. Maybe I wouldn't have chose that term, because I find a lot of some of the modern comics that I look at, they're really going for that widescreen aspect ratio. So it's basically you open a comic and it's 3 or 4 panels widescreen, and it's kind of like sometimes it's that way all throughout. And I'm like, okay, then make a movie. I mean, why not take advantage of the I mean, we can guide a reader in the pacing of the comic book the way movies can't. So why would you take that away? And when I look at your comic, I don't see that widescreen. So I guess maybe some clarification on what you mean by, I guess, cinematic.
Yeah, I don't mean, I definitely feel like you should leverage the uniqueness of comic book storytelling when you're writing and designing a comic. Absolutely. I think, but no, I know I've seen the same thing you're talking about, and my reaction is kind of the same. It's like you clearly want to be a storyboard artist.
Right.
Like, it's like this is, you don't want to tell comic stories. You're hoping this comic gets turned into a movie or something. Like I feel that's how I read it anyway.
Yeah. I feel like that was common with, like, I don't know where it's at now, but I remember this era. I think it was like in the early 2000s where like it was almost like every Marvel and DC book was just wide horizontal panels, like 3 stacked. And that was the entire book. So it was like you were watching freeze frames from like a film. And it was like, it was completely boring. Like
that could have been a pushback also in the 90s comics, where people just went insane with no reasoning for the panels, just like, you know, let's just do whatever we can, which, you know, part of that came from, you know, the advances in printing technologies and the things you could do with the colors and just, you know, and why not stretch those muscles? But it's always that whenever you introduce a new technology, people just go nuts. Like when somebody first gets their hand on Photoshop, well, look at all these filters. I'm going to use every single one of them. It was kind of like that with coloring and stuff. And it took a little while before, like, okay, maybe we could pull back a little bit. And I think that the 90s was rife with that. So maybe it was maybe that was a reaction to that, but still, you know, it's finding that medium, you know, not too, you know, for no reason at all other than we can do whatever we want here, but maybe not, you know, and I'm not saying never do like a scene like that where you've kind of got those widescreen things, but I mean, there's just there's so many different ways you can tell a story in comics. So
go ahead.
Well, I guess what I would, to just if someone else was confused, I guess when I say, like, I think of my sort of stories cinematically, I guess not in terms of like the look of it, because like I said, I spend a lot of time thinking about page turns and panels and figuring out how to make literally a comic book. But I think I have a cinematic sort of aesthetic in terms of storytelling where I care about characters, I care about dialogue. I have no problem with allowing quiet moments. I have no problem like pulling out, like drawing out space. It doesn't have to be splash page after splash page after splash, you know, like, and it's like, I think it's like, no, I want to tell, I guess, more of a textured grown up story if I can, even in the context of my sort of pulpy concept. Like I want this to be a mature read. So I guess that's what I'm sort of trying to allude to with like the cinematic thought. But I have to say, when it comes to paneling, I was thinking about this the other day. Even if I could remember what book I was reading, I wouldn't say because it's mean. But when it comes to page layouts, I'm realizing I'm a little bit of a traditionalist, where like I can't tell which order to be reading these panels, it pisses me off. Like and when I think of like some of the greatest comic books of all time, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Watchmen, Dark Knight Return, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Very 9-panel grid.
Yeah, it's nothing crazy.
Yeah.
Nothing
Mouse,
like
9-panel grid.
Mouse, whatever. Yeah, like it's all like Persepolis, like whatever. It's all just like it's very V for Vendetta. You know, just you name it. There's nothing crazy going on with the paneling, and nothing irritates me more than when I'm reading a book. It's like I don't know what panel I'm supposed to read next.
Yeah.
Or like it's all these crazy shapes. Like we're gonna just make it like weird and like unless there's a narrative purpose to this.
Yeah.
Like the protagonist is tripping, or like you're in a war and you're trying to show like it's crazy and chaotic and you don't know what's happening. Everything's happening at once. Okay, sure. But if that's like the normal way, you're like that annoys me. You know.
Yeah, and I think it gives up some of the control you have as a cartoonist too, where it's like when you stick to like, because I'm the same way, where it's like I'd consider myself a little experimental with my paneling, and I've been complimented for that for my work, you know, where it's like people have been like, this is kind of weird and outside of the box, like, and it changes a lot, like it's not the same grid. But I'm told that, but it pretty much is the same grid. Like I'm using basically a 9-panel grid, and then I deviate from that, but that's my default to kind of break the rules from. And one of the reasons is specifically that, where it's like you could make the most beautiful thing in the world, and if it's not readable, it's not enjoyable. And I'm a nerd for like really weird meta comics. Like, I mean, Chris Ware is probably one of the hardest reads you're going to have as a cartoonist. But the thing I like about Ware is he does all of the crazy breaking the rules within the framework of the rules.
He understands. So like,
if you know the logic of comic reading, it's like it's actually followable, and that's why people freak out about his work and like why the dude's picked up so many Eisners, because it's not that he's just filling a chaotic page with weird shapes and doing this weird airplane manual thing. It's like he's designing pages where by the time you're done with it, you've rotated it 50 times and it makes sense.
Yeah.
And like, so I agree with you on that, Gary. And I think that shows like what you were saying too about like panoramic. It's like, you know, there's a really, I was going to show the pages, but I don't want to because it's a big scene in here.
I mean, it's up to you. Like I now that we're kind of out of the launch window, like I'm less protective of spoilers, whatever, you know, it's,
I want to keep this part secret because it's like some of the fun stuff. Like there's a conversation about, you know, a very big action sequence. And then there's a scene where you open it up and show the action sequence.
Yes.
And up until the action, you've kind of kept us paced in a grid. And I think it's like let me see. It's like a 6.
I usually do like a 6. My default is kind of a like a 2x3.
So we've been in a 6-panel grid, and occasionally like one of those panels will widen. But then when we get to the action sequence, it goes
reveal.
Panoramic. Yeah. And you start having the big half-page spreads and wide shots. And like that is where I always feel like those Marvel comics from the early 2000s, and I think they've broken from that sense, which is good. Scott's probably right. It was probably a reaction to just these illegible comics where it's like, I don't know what I'm... I was making a joke about that on a stream a couple times ago, like the old McFarlane panel trick where it would be like, I don't know what this is. It's a grid. And then it zooms out and it's like, oh, it's a fly. And then it's like, oh, it's a fly on coffee. Oh, it's a fly on a coffee mug on a person. Right. Oh, it's a person in a building. Oh, it's the Earth, like the mega zoom thing. And it's cool. But those sometimes would be really impossible to follow. But I do think you consciously, like, you know, it's not that you're saying, oh, you know, we can't use these big panoramic grids that look very cinematic. It's just that, like, just like anything, like if you write a song and the entire song is a chorus,
right,
you're missing out on like the joy of like songwriting and composition of music, right? Where it's like you want the crescendo, you want like you want different phases in a song. Like
it's
you don't
it's crunchy peanut butter. You need the creamy and the crunch.
Yeah.
Like if you're doing it all beginning to end the same thing, like it can be fine, but to me it's that shift is interesting. And I had always imagined, like, I think once she gets into telling her story that involves all the action and the crazy stuff, like this is where the comic's going to open up. And there were a couple thoughts I was justifying it in a couple levels. First of all, I liked the idea of that stylistic switch where you knew that's like your kind of Dorothy steps out of her house and the world's in color moment, where it's like a little different, you know, you realize now you're in a different space. On top of that, I liked the kind of subconscious narrative thing where before then she's in a jail cell. It's small, it's tiny, it's tight, like all the panels should be tight, like you feel cramped, you're close to her, you know, like you said, I want you to feel like you're kind of, you picture this room, you see the cinder blocks, you see the table, you see your handcuffs. It's like we're very zoomed in, we're micro. Now we're outside and we're seeing crazy stuff and we're seeing big sci-fi spectacle and we're seeing like a giant canyon. Like now you need to feel like there's room. There needs to be blinding white light above you. Like you need to feel like this space. So there was like that thought. And then also I thought, like, you know, the series is called Dinosaurs versus Marsbots. This is the time to let loose. Like this is the time to do like the big flashy, showy, gory, crazy stuff. You know, and not to limit myself with little, you know, like tiny panels. Like now's the time to get a little crazy. Now's the time to push.
There's also a sense of just reading it. It's like a sense of play in it too, where it's like I can tell you're having fun when you get to the, like both books are like that, where it's like they've got this very slow paced vibe, but when it gets to like the gore and the kind of sci-fi elements, it's like almost like you've just, you know, you've just been given permission to just go nuts, and it's fun. Like where what the story, like where the stories go, and very surprising. But
I love, you know, and I didn't notice that. You guys will appreciate this. Other creators out there watching will appreciate this. I think there's something about doing your work. It starts to reveal to yourself what you're doing. Like, I think, like, if you had asked me with my first comic, like, what kind of stories do you like to tell and how do you like to tell them and what do you think your messages and themes are? I would have given you some answer. But now that I'm working on the third and fourth, like, I think you start to oh, I think I didn't realize this, but I've got these themes in here and I didn't realize that, but this is how I like to tell a story. One thing I'm noticing from the first two, I didn't notice this when I set out, and the one I'm writing now, I like to start on like the dial to 11 volume. I like to start at 1 and just the whole comic like up, like the whole time. I don't like to go from like 7 to 11. I don't like to like keep it at one level. I want to start it as mundane and like easy and quiet as we can, and I want to just gradually build it to like this great, like where you realize like what is happening in this comic. Like that's kind of what I want to do. You know?
Yeah, I did that with Young and the Dead. Like the first issue is very much this suburban neighborhood, just kind of humdrum. That's what I wanted, but I second guessed myself on that because I'm like, maybe I should start with the action and then pull back, you know. But I don't know.
I like that though.
Yeah, I like the building. So when it happens,
I like Poltergeist. I was talking about Poltergeist earlier, so it's on my head. But I like that Poltergeist starts with just like the family and mom and dad smoking pot in the bedroom, and that it's not starting with anything. You know, like or The Exorcist. It's like the actress living in her house with her daughter, you know, and like there's nothing. It's not, you know, and then through the whole thing, now it's like it's going places. Pulp Fiction. We're talking about, you know, Europe. You know,
I worry about that too with the two issues that I wrote that I'm working on now, 5 and 6, which will conclude everything. But it's gone from a very, you know, slow, I'm trying to think of the term for it.
Build, right?
Yeah, like a slow build. Yeah, pace to right now. It's just like there's so many things going on. I mean, it's like it'll be like seriously, and I second guess this too. I'm like, is this just going too crazy? Because it'll be like one group of characters, like seriously, like a page will be one scene, the next page will be another scene, then the next page will be another scene, and it just keeps flipping, and it just keeps. But I guess it's building to a crescendo, so it makes sense. And I've run it by people, and now that no problems with it. It seems natural. It just seems weird because I don't know. It's so different from where I started to where I am now.
It's a funny, and it's something that, again, like only a few people are going to relate to, but yeah, kind of discovering your story as you're writing your story.
Slow burn. Robert Johnson says that's what I was looking for. Slow burn.
That's good. Yeah. I like it though, because I like, at least following Young and the Dead so far, it's like where you've left it, Scott. To me, it's making me anticipate the next 2 issues, because it's going to be all of the action. Like there's been a little bit of action, actually quite a lot, but it's like kind of interspersed throughout. And now we're at like the big showdown. So it's like,
and it's unclear to me. What I'm enjoying about it is I have no guesses about where this is going to wind up.
Yeah.
And
that's fun. Or like sometimes, movies or comics or something, you kind of like, I have an idea where this is probably going, and I might still be excited to see it, but like it'll probably be like A, B, and C.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. Like,
and I thought about that too. And when I gave it to my girlfriend, who's a writer, I gave it to her, and I was just worried that she would see certain things coming, because there's a few reveals coming up, and just and there was even one question she had, like, she asked me, like, what happened with it? Do you forget about this? And I said, just keep reading. So, and she didn't see it coming. So I was like, because when you're close to it, you think, I know where it's going, and I've had this in my head the whole time. Is this obvious? But I don't think so. And I've never had anyone, comment like, isn't that one thing? I think that's going to happen here. And no. So
I struggled with that a lot with 97. There's like a twist moment in like the last.
Yeah.
And I guess it's like, look, someone somewhere, some percent, they're always going to see the things coming.
Yeah.
I remember I saw The Usual Suspects, and I knew Kevin Spacey was Kaiser Sose, like, like a half hour in, I was like, oh, I bet, and there's always that person who somehow kind of like, I did my best to try and conceal that, but in an honest way. Like, I didn't want it to be like, I didn't want to lie to the reader to hide this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I just tried to write it where it's like, you know what, even if you do see it coming, I'll just try and make it interesting enough that it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the thing. Like, you can go crazy trying to figure out, like, well, is someone going to guess where this is going? Like, can you imagine if the WandaVision were like the WandaVision people were? I'm sure like that.
A lot of people guessed what kind of the reveal in the last one.
Doctor Strange is going to show up, right? And I don't know if we'll find out, but like, it should still be fun when it happens, if it happens.
Yeah. That's another one that had a very slow build. It was very interesting the first 2 episodes, but nothing really. They're little tiny hints, but to the point where, like, I was watching with my girlfriend, and she kind of almost bailed. She said, "This is really interesting, but." And then it wasn't until that 3rd episode, and like, then she got invested. So
I had the same experience. Those first 2 episodes, I still maintain. I see a lot of people defending, like, no, but it's paying off. You see. I think you had 1 episode worth of material in those first 2 episodes. Like, I'm sorry, like my thing was, this is getting off topic. But I felt like after you got past the gimmick of like, look, it's an old sitcom.
I think Corey's with you.
Yeah, they are super boring. Once you get past the thing, it's like, oh, it's an old sitcom. There's not a lot there, and they're not weird enough or winking enough or showing the scenes enough to be kind of interesting. I almost wanted to see those 2 episodes done by David Lynch or something, where they're just a little like they just need to be a little stranger or
a little more warping,
Yeah, where this is just parody. Like I felt like all I was watching was parody, and that's not. I grew up on these shows. I get the joke. I know what you're doing. It's not that funny.
Right.
Like,
I thought technically, I was impressed technically, but
yeah, like the recreation. I mean, even the song.
If it kept going like that, I would have.
Yeah. If it had been, can you imagine 2 or 3 more episodes? I would have been done. Yeah.
I think like one of the things you mentioned though that I think is good too about like the reveal or like the twist is like I actually think it's fun when there's a twist in a story. I think a story that only hinges on a twist is not necessarily the best story. And so like one of the things I love about like a good twist, and this is the thing you were mentioning where it's like there's kind of like I love classic like mystery series. Like I love Poirot by Agatha Christie. I like Sherlock Holmes.
Did you see Knives Out?
Yeah.
Knives Out.
It's so good.
Yeah.
So good. Okay, so there's a way to do that feels really cheap and annoying.
Yeah.
Which is like it's the same premise, it's the same structure. It's like everybody's at a house, you have the detective come to the house and figure it out. And at the end there's a big twist, right? Now, the bad mystery writer hinges on the twist just being so surprising that they don't even seed it into the plot. So it's like it's literally just out of nowhere. Like, wait, what? Where did it's the butler did it, but the butler wasn't even shown in the plot. And it as a fan of like mystery writing, like I love Columbo a lot too. It's really great. You should rewatch it. I've been rewatching it. It's actually really good.
I haven't seen that in forever. That's
dude,
funny.
I hadn't either, and my wife and I started binging it.
Where is it playing? Where are you streaming that?
We got the set because we were just like, we haven't watched Columbo in forever. So, and it's great. Like, and it's hilarious because it makes me feel really old because I'm like, I think Peter Falk is like my age at the beginning, and I always thought he was like this really old dude. And I'm like, holy crap, he's pretty young, like at the start. Anyhow, but the point being, like, even in those, what made them so great is like, even if those were weird at the time because they start with the murder, right? And then you're just watching him hone in on the murder. But still, if you were to flip it, you would actually be able to, from the clues, assess like who did it.
If you knew where to look.
Yeah.
Right.
So, like, to me, that's the key thing. Like, Corey mentioned it in the chats too, where it's just like, being honest with the reader is so important because people can sense bullshit, and if you bullshit people as an artist, they're not. I don't think they're going to get as into your stories. And so, like, I think what you were talking about with the twist, where you're like, I wanted the twist to be surprising. I know people might be able to figure it out. I think to have a really good twist, it has to be something someone could possibly figure out.
That's a good point. I didn't think of it that way, that maybe that's a test of whether you have a legitimate twist.
Yeah.
Like, could someone have asked the question, or maybe seen the clues, Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's what makes a really good twist, right? Because when the twist happens, then you start thinking back to like the Kaiser Sose thing or whatever, where you're like, oh, it's on the mug, and like there's all these different signs. Or what was the one where the guy like loses his memory?
Memento. Yeah.
Memento is great like that too, where it's like once it kind of unravels, it's like you can kind of thread everything together and go, oh, I've been blind.
The Sixth Sense. I mean, that's one. The Sixth Sense, that's like the classic, and that's one where I feel like even though it spoils it if you know the twist.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still very earned. Like that's a movie you can rewatch knowing that, and it's like, oh, I see that. Yeah, like I get it now. Yeah.
But if it were just a gimmicky twist, then rewatching it, you'd just be like, yeah, that still doesn't make sense. Like the ending of Lost, where it's like it just doesn't hold up. Like there's no way I can watch the ending of Lost now and be like, yeah, that was fulfilling and tied all the plot threads. Like, no, it didn't. It just kind of,
No, it's the equivalent of like, if you're talking about Knives Out, like the equivalent of the murder is like a UPS delivery driver who we never saw, like through the entire movie. Like, oh, it was just that guy. You know, that's not, you know, yeah, you need to see, like, it had to be someone you met.
Yeah.
There had to be hints that you weren't paying attention to. There, yeah.
I love that. I do like think with like, so with paneling, you also kind of mentioned something that I think is important, which was like kind of the mood of the paneling too. So it's like we've talked about paneling to control time. And Scott, like you didn't really chime in on that too much, but you totally pay attention to that too when you're structuring a page, like the time per the size.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've done a scene before where I wanted it to be very monotonous, and I used a lot of panels with basically nothing going on. There's a scene where I just wanted to show the kind of home life, and they're kind of sitting. The main character's sitting at the kitchen table with his family, and you know his mother's recently remarried, and the stepdad's kind of a dick, and I'm just kind of showing them, like, you know, scraping the knives on the plate, and the younger brother not wanting to eat his food, kind of pushing it away with a disgusted look. Just all these little tiny things, and I did it. Is it like a 9? It's probably more than a 9-panel grid, maybe like 12. I don't remember, but yeah, just these little panels, and then and if there's a big action scene, maybe it's a big splash page. So that's what I really like about being able to pace a comic, is that you can kind of control, because I could have done one big scene and showed each character at the table with the look on their face. Maybe it could have been effective, but I like the little vignettes and everything. So
yeah, I also think just trying to think of a way to summarize, I think, what we were all saying with like timing. It's like, it's important to remember, like, your reader is not in a rush to go anywhere. Like, I think a lot of people are writing comics as if their reader is like ADD and like doesn't have the attention span to kind of sit through a good story. And the problem is like, and Gary, you can probably chime in on this too, but it's like, I know when you're creating a comic, like my first time writing a comic, it was like a short, like 24 pager. Mm-hmm. And I remember just spending like almost a year on it because it was my first real shot at a comic, right? Yeah. And I just thought like that was forever, and it was like the longest thing, And I remember the first time somebody picked it up, and within like 15 minutes they had finished the story.
Yeah.
And it was like a real enlightening experience for me, where I was like, oh, that's how comics work. Like and there wasn't anything wrong with that person reading it that way. Like, it was a fast read.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty paced out comic. So like, I think people need to remember like the time people actually invest in reading these things. Even the best of us artists, right? If we're analyzing and going through the pages, it's like, we're not going to spend the time the artist took to create it on reading it, right?
No. I mean, it's not even close.
Yeah.
I think in 97, in like my thank you page, like at the end, I mentioned, like, you spend like a year and a half dying and slaving over this thing for someone to read it for 15 minutes and go like, yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's like and it's funny because, just when I remember just drawing it, like 97, it's a long book. Like, it's 59 pages of story.
Yeah. So, it's very impressive.
Because it's an anthology series. So every one of my issues, it's like a self-contained, like, that's it. Like, it's a complete arc of these characters, and that's that. So they're fatter than, like, your normal issue. But, just drawing it, like, I remember, especially with 75, there are sequences where you've been drawing a sequence for weeks or maybe months. Like, my rate when I'm drawing is a finished page a week.
Yeah.
So if it takes me 10 pages to get to the big action sequence we were talking about, like, by week 10, I'm like, oh my God, this is taking for, like, the readers are going to check out. Like, they're going to be so like, oh, where is this going? Like, they're going to just be dying.
Yeah.
I didn't get that at all.
Like, a couple page turns and you're there.
Yeah.
Like, it's not action packed, but it's so engaging.
Yeah.
I mean, both of the books, and they're both very different from each other.
But it is interesting when you're in the thick of creating it. I understand why there are so many kind of ADD comics out there where they're just like all over the place, and like the panels are constantly changing, and it's like we got to change the viewpoint. It's got to change every shot. And I think part of that does stem from like when you're drawing that way, it can get really boring. Like
you're thinking like I need to get to it on your time, and your time is like geologic time compared to a reader's time. Like it's a very different experience. So
for sure.
So I try to, and I have to tell myself this like every other week when I'm in drawing mode. But like once I sign off on my script, I just have to trust like I believed in the script.
Yes.
You know, I don't know. It feels weird now. I've been doing this for months. I'm over it. I'm tired. I am starting to second guess everything. But I signed off on the script. I liked the script. We're just going. Like this is the plan. We're executing the plan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because you're in the middle of like hiking the Appalachian Trail or something. You know, like I mean, you want to turn back. It's like no, this was the plan. We got to get through. Yeah.
And that boredom can be really good for like that you were describing for like kind of creating an out of the box scenario with paneling for sure. Because I have had definite moments where I was going to, when it comes to, and it's also a big testament as to why it's important to do like roughs and thumbnails. Because once you're to the finish, if at that point you're kind of changing because you're bored, like you're going to change all your panels. You know? So when it's at this like loose and rough stage, that's when I've had like moments of I'm getting bored with a sequence and suddenly this crazy idea pops in my head of like, I'm talking about a YouTube search. And so now I can have the YouTube search menu as actual panels of the comic. Like weird stuff like that just comes out of nowhere. And it's not like a formal comic thing. It's just part of that weird artistic process where you're like, well, what if? And you come up with these cool ideas to kind of create more interest for yourself when you're making it. So that can be a good thing, but you have to keep it under control because otherwise you can end up with these totally unreadable pages. And like one of the things I think is great, and everyone should pick up Gary's comic, but one of the things that's great about your comic is like it is formal and it is playful with structure, but it's still formal. So it's like it reads like a breeze. Like there's not a point where you can get lost in it instead of constantly being reminded like, oh, this is a drawn thing that I'm reading, you know?
I appreciate that.
And I think that's really cool.
They are longer books. The first one is about 40 pages of story. The second one's 59. And I always feel good when I get feedback from people saying like, I expected to sit down and read a couple pages and I blew through it. Like, you know, I read the whole thing. And that to me, like, it makes me feel like I did something right. Like if I can tell a story that long and I like dialogue, I like dragging things out. Like I like spending time with things. If people will stick with it and read it in a sitting without even really expecting to, like, I feel like, okay, I hit something right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, you know, something I was thinking about when you were talking about playing with panels. Have you guys read, it's not a comic book, it's a novel, House of Leaves?
No, I'd like
that book. I was looking at my bookshelf to see if I have it handy. You know, it gave me ideas when it came to playing with panels, and I don't see it. I know I have it somewhere squirreled away, but basically it's kind of a horror novel. It's really good. I recommend if anyone likes to read and likes to read kind of unconventional and experimental books.
Ooh, I like it.
House of Leaves, I would say check it out. But basically, without spoiling anything, the house is kind of a strange, it's not really a haunted house, but it's like a strange space-time distortion house where like it seems bigger on the inside than it is from the outside, like a TARDIS or something. There are rooms that don't make sense. And they have the scientist team come and try and figure out this people's house where they're like, there's like a basement, it's not supposed to have a basement, and then there's a sub-basement, and then there's a room that shouldn't fit in the floor plan. And they're like, it's a lot of like a lot of the book is just documenting the weirdness of their house.
Oh, that's awesome.
Sounds a little akin to like Lock and Key. Is it Lock and Key? Is that the one I'm thinking of?
Which one is that?
If I'm getting the name right, it's a Joe Hill, which is Stephen King's son. It's this comic book. I think it's called Lock and Key.
Yeah, it's really popular, and I've never read it.
I've never read it either.
Yeah, so they've got these keys, and they each open different areas, and they do different things, and it's just this bizarre house. And it's not really, like you said, it's not really so much haunted in a way.
It's just like disturbing and confusing. Yeah. But there was one sequence. It does this a lot through the book, but there was one sequence in particular that I thought, like, it was such a weird revelation. Some people might think it was gimmicky, but when I was reading it, I loved it, and I thought, like, yeah, why not do this? Why not have fun? Why not play? There's this hallway that they're going down, and it's getting narrower and narrower as they're going down it. And as a result, the text on the page with each page is getting tighter and tighter. So you're starting to read basically like words on top of each other. You know, like it's doing this.
I love it.
That's fun. Like that's really like, why not? And I was thinking of that in 75. There's a hallucination sequence. And I started doing weird things where it's like, well, the backgrounds have been white. Now I'm going to start to make the backgrounds black as this person's really tripping. And the page numbers are upside down. And it's like, why not? Why not have fun? You know, where it's
I don't know if I noticed that.
Yeah, I'm going to acknowledge the fact. It's kind of fourth wall breaking where it's like, I know this is a comic. And like, let's just screw around with it. Let's screw around with the page numbers. Let's screw around with the panels, you know? Yeah,
that is amazing. And I think like, that sort of play works if you're following a structure.
Yes. If you do the whole book like that, it's obnoxious.
Yeah. So it's like it's kind of one of those things of like even what one of the things you said about sort of signing off on your script. I think that's really important. At least I've found that important too, where it's like I feel like in a weird way, as a writer artist, your job as the artist side of you is to do the best job you can for yourself as a client to your own story, right? Yeah. And so it's like every choice you make should service the story. If it doesn't service the story, you're probably not making a good choice.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
But like that to me makes sense because it services the story, where it's like, it's almost like if you were filming that, maybe you'd have the film get like screwed up and like
starting to shake,
frames or whatever. That doesn't mean the whole movie's that, you know?
Right.
But it's like to create the emotion in the scene you're in. And I think that maybe can kind of get to the mood thing before we kind of call it, because it is almost an hour.
Are we already? Okay. Yeah.
I know, I can't believe it. But yeah, so like, let's get into mood, because I do think a lot of these choices in like timing and pacing and size of panels, and whether it's traditionally structured or whether you start flipping things upside down because somebody's tripping off hallucinogens, you know?
Yeah.
Like what causes those choices, and like and kind of like, yeah, let's get into that.
Well, I don't know if I'm responding to exactly the question you're asking, but I think when it comes to when you say mood, I tend to think of usually like the human emotional elements.
Yeah.
Like the story. And that's where I think I would use the word more unreservedly. Like I think I have a cinematic aesthetic where that's where you're going to see tight shots of people's faces, and you're going to get into mannerisms. I've talked about this in my videos.
You're really good at that, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know what? I am a firm believer in shooting reference models if you really want to get your human characters right. Mm-hmm. And I don't like, I've done it, but I don't like going to Google image search. I don't like doing all that stuff. Like, I like to find people who are game, who I can pose, where I can get exactly what I'm looking for. And you know, I have my books of like facial expressions and like, you know, like models and stuff, because I think that's where you get impact from a reader. I think it becomes a very anthropological thing where if you see someone crying, your heart breaks for them. If you see someone furious, you can tell. Like if you see what they're doing with their hands or their body language or whatever, like you read that, you get it. And that's where I think if you're going, you can do it with something stylistic. Like a lot of the comics that you guys have done on the IRS show.
Yeah.
That's something they're very abstract and very stylish, and yet it does have an emotional impact.
Yeah.
But I think it's almost like, it's like an reverse uncanny valley where like there's a middle ground where you're not going to get any kind of emotional connection from a character. You can either get a little more realistic and vivid, or you can get very impressionistic and stylish and like give people a feel for something.
Yeah.
With the stories I'm telling, I try to do more vivid and more like I want to see the eyes. I want to see like what they're doing with their body. I want to see like the expression, the reaction they're having to what somebody said. You know, like I want those human, very, very human specific moments.
Yeah. I think that's great. What you're mentioning too of like having models or references, I definitely do that as much as possible.
I can tell. And so you can tell. I was even noticing it. I was going through Lady Killer. I was showing Lady Killer to my girlfriend, and I was saying like, I can tell she used a reference model for this. Like you can pick out, like not here, but here.
Oh yeah.
I don't love that so much when you can tell the difference. Like I feel like that's kind of a fail. Agreed. But like when it's blended well enough where it's like it's just effective. Like and I can tell with yours, like you're definitely like you're looking at photos, you're posing yourself, you're doing things, or it's like this is cool.
Yeah, but the thing is, like a lot of people don't realize like that tradition's age is old. I mean, like even Disney animators, you know, had. Most traditional animators and cartoonists, like pre-computer, had like a mirror right next to their drawing table. So there's a lot of great photos. I think it was like Al Jaffe or something, like staring at a mirror to draw like an angry dog's expressions. Like he's like glaring and then drawing like this pissed off dog, and then like the dog's laughing and he's laughing. But the more you can pull from life, like with expression, like the better it's going to be.
I think so. And I'm also sold on, and I've told people, like, if you want to become a better artist and you could only do one thing, take a life drawing class.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like there's nothing that's going to like improve your ability more. Nothing is more difficult to draw than a human form, especially undraped human. And then not only that, like, I think it's because your eyes are tuned to it. Like, you know when a body doesn't look right. You know when a face doesn't look right. So the game is raised. Like, I could probably draw an adequate draft and no one would blink. And it would be mediocre. But if you draw an adequate person or a mediocre person, everyone's like, that looks wonky. That looks weird. I mean, now it's hard with COVID, but like I take a life drawing class, a figure drawing class every couple of years. Like ever since college. Like I feel like that's, you know, if you can get good at drawing hands and faces and feet and expressions and poses, you can draw anything. Like there's nothing that's going to be harder than that. So,
and what's weird is a lot of the principles that what's weird is I was like a lot of illustrators where it's like, you know, initially I was like, I can draw really well, but like type is scary and I don't want to do graphic design and stuff. And like, I remember what cracked open typography for me was after having life drawing and hating the classes. I enjoyed the process in my head, but I just didn't know how to do it yet. And finally that moment happened. That happens, I think, for a lot of artists that like, it's frustrating for students to hear, you know, where they're like, just be loose, be gestural. And you're like, I can't even get this in. It's not long enough pose. And it's an hour pose, which once you start getting life drawing, it's like, that's an absurdly, like, I'm bored with an hour pose. I don't need to render everything. I want to gesture. I want to work it out. I want to find all those key points on the figure and then move on to a new pose. So like a 5 minutes, great. Like you don't need like but But I was still at that phase of like, no, don't move yet. Don't move yet. I'm still rendering this eyeball, you know? And, but then something happened, and it was one class. I had like a costume figure class, and just, I sucked at it. And my wife was in it and just soared because she's always been excellent at life drawing. And then there's this one class under a teacher named Yuji at my school where it just clicked. It just all clicked.
Yeah.
And I was like, I even what I was choosing to sketch with changed, and that wasn't from his class. It's just because it clicked. So I was like, oh, I should sketch with like a ballpoint pen, or like a V-ball pen. I don't need like some charcoal stick. Like I want something that's permanent, so I have to commit and just own it. Yeah. And I started noticing all the little map moments, you know, like one of my favorite ones for life drawing that people don't pay enough attention to is just this, like that shape, like the line here and the direction here, like gives you so much data and information about the angle of the face, like how everything's working, little things like that.
It makes someone recognizable. Like if you did that right in a portrait or something, they're not, oh yeah, I know that model. Yeah.
And that's what exploded it for me. And then like I suddenly had moments where I'm like, all I wanted, like if I could get paid to just draw, I would probably, rather than comics, I would probably just sit at like shopping malls and just draw people, because it's super fun.
It's super fun. Yeah. And I loved it. And there was a learning curve for me too, because I was a pencil and ink person.
Yeah.
Before, like up until I started taking life drawing classes in college. And that's, you know, that's very like fiddly little. Yes. And suddenly you have like the 24x36 newsprint pad and charcoal, which I just thought was bullshit. Like you can't draw, like, I mean, this is terrible. Like, I mean, it's like you can't do anything detailed. And and I remember my first time, the woman looming over me saying like, use your whole arm, drop from the shoulder, drop from the elbow, like, because I wanted to draw like a pencil, a little pen drawing. And that first semester was rough. Like in all my, like you'd see these big, again, 2x3 foot pieces of paper with a drawing this big on it, you know, and like me trying to make this charcoal work by sharpening it until finally it was like, oh wait, I get it. Well, I need to just sort of let go in a little way. And I need to, you know, I can't, like I have all the wrong approach. And then it came together, and now I love it. I'm evangelical about life drawing. So
and I think it's brilliant. But like one of the cool things about what you're recommending with life drawing too is like once you crack that open, it's easy to crack open other things. Like for me, type unlocked when I realized there's an anatomy to it. And actually when I started studying type a little more and realizing all the original typographers were like illustrators, like, because the letters were illustrated, like they're just built on a structure, just like a human body, just like, you know, like a page structure. So it's nerdy, but it's like great because you can start kind of unlocking these inner structures in a human form. And the human form is so complex and symmetrically asymmetrical. That like when you can start seeing like what's underneath the skin of a person, and you start figuring that out, you figure out what these different points are, right? Like these really important points on the human figure. You start seeing those points in type, you start seeing those points in and for me, like that's what unlocked type for me, and like suddenly I wasn't so nervous about type or panel layout. Like same thing, I felt intimidated by panel layout, and then I had to realize like, oh, there's like a structure and a grid to it. It's not, you know, so I think that's great advice, like to kind of.
And I think the last thing I'd say about it is I think it helps you see. You have to get your vision so tuned and honed to do good life drawing. I think that translates to any kind of visual art. Like once you can start to master that. But and there are little stupid lessons I remember from 25 years ago that I still think of, just because, like, I remember a life drawing professor saying, like, did you ever notice that if you ask someone to look at their nails, guys will look at their nails like this, and women will look at their nails like this. And it was like, for some reason, I've never forgotten that. And like that's a great illustrator, comic booky kind of tip. You know, like if you're drawing someone looking at their nails, that's a great shorthand that it's just going to read right. You know, and like, little details like that where you're used to now really looking at people, really looking at their, and you can see now that I've said this, if you look at D versus M, you can see someone who's kind of like drunk, and you see like panels that are just somebody's hands.
Yeah.
Panels that are just like somebody's, you know, like you see neck or like something where it's like, you can tell like, oh, this is a guy who's kind of into form and, you know, yeah.
Well, and also, you know, what you were describing about hands, it's like just in the way you have your character like handle their cigarette.
Yeah.
It's different than other characters you've had handling a cigarette. Like it's like a different way of holding it. It's a different way of kind of observing it while doing it. And it's funny because, you know, I'm an ex-smoker, and it's like very believable, which is great because one of my biggest pet peeves in comics is when somebody is a non-smoker and they have smokers, because they're usually totally dead. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm glad you appreciated that. And that was tricky too, because my reference model is not a smoker.
Yeah.
So like I had to, you know, and she was very good, but like there was little bits of like, do it a little like, cause I'm not a smoker, but I've been around smokers. I know smokers, kind of like just enough to know like, you know, a little like this, a little like this. The other thing that was tricky that I thought you had to have a live model for, one of the main characters, 97, she's handcuffed most of the time. It's not kinky, it's nothing weird. It's like a law enforcement thing. But like, I thought to get this to look right, I need to buy handcuffs and I need to like have them on the so like I can't have her just like pretend. Like she needs to feel the weight of this. Yeah. I need to see all the chain drapes. I need to like, and like, it was fun. I always imagined, even when I was writing the script, it would be fun visually to see someone smoking casually while handcuffed.
Yeah.
Like I like that kind of visual. And I think it's kind of storytelling. You see this woman, it's not the first time she's been incarcerated. Like she's kind of comfortable with a lot of what's going on, as uncomfortable as she is. Like this isn't her first rodeo. And I think to do that, like I need to get all those little details right. I need to get the smoking right, get the cuffs right, get the position right, get the model right, get the expressions right. But,
yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I love it. Well, I do think that expression, and then like once again the choice to frame it in an interesting way, like in paneling too, and like sort of choose to like, for instance, what you're framing, like to focus on hands, to focus on like, you know, I mean, in this conversation, I've been drinking a cup of coffee. Like if I were illustrating this, it might be cool to have the hand with the coffee instead of, or maybe I'm doing something with the coffee. Like, I don't know, maybe it's an awkward conversation. So I'm literally like, maybe I'm putting my finger in the coffee. I don't know. Who knows?
And that again would be my thought of like, what's a cinematic moment? Little things like I guess a better thing would be, I like actory moments. I like, you know, like seeing like, how are you making this person behave? You know, like, and is it just what they're saying and just their face, or is it the whole performance? You know, and I try to think about that with the characters. But then, the paneling, for sure, you know, everything is in relation. So you're deciding what the mood is, you're deciding what the emotion is, you're deciding what's going on, and then it almost becomes like a cropping problem. If you've done drawing or, you know, graphic design or anything, it's like, I mean, that kind of is like how tight or far, you know, that's almost a panel question. But I mean, I often think about what's for whatever, it's probably my fine art background. I think of panels sometimes as like a mat.
Yeah.
Like, how would I mat this work? You know, like if I drew this thing, okay, well now how would I crop it?
Yeah, and I think one of the fun things about like just deep diving into this for a topic too, I think it highlights like the fun puzzle that is comics. It's like, so we're just talking about paneling mostly.
Yeah.
And like you could literally discuss like paneling. We could even start getting into like interesting page grids, you know, and like the golden mean and like like some of the hidden lines in on a page. There are literally graphic designers who spent like their lifetimes like as a hobby. So like when they're not doing professional design, they just study different page grids that have existed throughout centuries and kind of try to map that out and find like the ideal page grid. And I mean, so that's one element of like a billion in comics. And I think it's one of the things that keeps us all interested in it as a medium, because it's like, it's kind of impossible to get perfect.
No.
But it's so fun to try.
It is. Well, and we've laughed in past videos about, like I tell the story all the time about I wanted to do a creative thing and a comic seemed like the easiest. So I was like, oh, I'll do a comic. I'd never done a comic before, which now like I think it's probably the hardest thing I could have done. Like any almost like people, but that is what keeps it sort of interesting, because it's, I think you're right. You're never going to perfectly execute it. And because you feel like, well, maybe next time I can get even closer, you know, it kind of keeps you in this hellscape. There's comics. Like, I mean, this thing of like, you know, but I mean, I'm noticing even now, like, I think 97 was better than 75. I think what I'm writing now will be better than either one of them, because it's all like based on what I did. Well, how can I push it now? And what could I have done better and whatever? And you're always taking what you learned and like, I can execute a little better. I have no illusion that I will knock it out of the park and hit everything perfectly. But you're always like seeing like, oh, but next time I'm gonna do this. And that will keep you in it.
Yeah, and I think like one of the great things about what you're describing with that too is like it's very much like life drawing. The more you do these, the more you get closer to these moments of like things unlocking that become kind of innate. And so I will say like comics are a challenge for me, but it's never been as hard as that first comic. Like the first comic I did seriously was like probably the hardest it's been to make comics. It's still difficult. It's just like I make more progress than I did initially. And I also have built some muscles to like kind of trust some instincts, like the instinct where it's like when I'm thumbnailing, is this just me wanting to change it up? Or is this like a cool idea that I should pursue for like a paneling thing? And some innate like tricks where you're like, you can kind of recognize when you're doing like, and you balance this really well, Gary, and I know you're aware of it because it's like, at least it seems like you must be, but like with talking head panels, they can get really boring. Yeah. And so you really have to be conscious of like what you're doing to avoid it just being like a bunch of floating heads, like in conversation.
Well, I do think about it a lot because I mean, everybody knows. I think part of it is, again, that's like another argument for like, I want my human characters to look good. Like, and if I'm really doing like performance with my human characters, they should be fun to look at, even if ultimately what you're seeing is the same view, you know, like over and over in a conversation. But that also goes to what you were talking about before, where sometimes I'll be drawing it and I'll realize like, you know what, it's a good time to like throw in something to mix it up. So let's do like her hands holding a cigarette. Let's see this. Let's see the pack of cigarettes. Let's see her tapping. Like, how can I like, let's throw something a little different in just to break it up.
Totally.
But no, for sure.
That sort of thing gets easier to recognize, I'm imagining. Like, whereas on the first issue, it's like you might have learned, like, at least for me, like I know like my earlier comics, it was harder for me to kind of notice those things. And now it's like, even at the rough stage, I'm like, oh, okay, I got to change this up. Or, you know, it becomes a little easier, but like the problem with saying it becomes easier is like kind of ignoring the challenges that come up once you get unlock and figure out one thing, there's just a whole other thing. Like,
I think if any, I think I might have been even a little more nervous about keeping the reader's attention in the first one, because it was like it was my first time out and I didn't know, and I knew I was starting the story with a conversation, and I knew that to me that felt a little bold and asking a lot of the reader. So I was like, well, how? And that's why I liked the appeal of like, well, I'll put it in a car so I can constantly cut to all these things they're driving by.
Yeah.
You know, like I can, like yes, it's two people talking, but I can always show like some roadkill on the side of the road, and like now they're going over a bridge, and now there's some telephone poles. Like I can constantly be like showing, like this is a good excuse to change up the look the whole time.
That's
Did you freeze?
no! Did Gary freeze? Okay, while Gary's frozen, I'm going to just point out. So this is that trippy page where you'll notice like the 31 upside down.
It's funny, I don't think I ever realized that the hold on, let's pull on.
Here we go. So
sorry about that. I don't know where I dropped out. I'm sorry. Yeah. My internet's a little wonky sometimes.
It's okay. In your absence, I showed everybody the upside down.
Oh, the tripping and the upside down page number. Yeah, there we go. Cool.
I didn't notice the number flipped, and that's such a fun little detail.
Actually, I'm not going to spoil it, but I have an idea for something like that, some kind of playfulness with like the medium for the next one I'm writing that I'm kind of excited about. Like I obviously, and you'll, you know, maybe next year you'll see it, but like I told one person about it, and I was like, I kind of want to do this at this part, and I think it'd be neat. And I don't know. I think it's similar to something like that, but a little more ambitious, where it's really pushing. Like it's more playful. But
I love it.
But what I was going to say was, for me, Scott, I'd be interested to hear which comic you thought was hardest of yours. I found the second one much harder than the first, and I don't know if it could just be because it was a more complicated and ambitious story, but I think it's because I knew what I was getting myself into. Where like the first, it was always just like I was just a babe in the woods. So like the first one, I was writing the screenplay. I had no sense of like how to draw it or how to get it printed or how to do a cover. Like I wasn't thinking about it.
Yeah.
But after I had done the first one, I knew all those beats. I knew all the steps. I knew all the crap this was going to entail. So like you're writing it and you're thinking like, God damn it, I'm gonna have to draw this. And like, you know, and then like once you get the page count, you're like 59 pages. Like that's gonna take me forever. And like I think it was easier to be overwhelmed the second time because I knew the experience. You know, where the first time I didn't. I was just like, oh, I don't know, I guess I'll just draw a page, you know, and then draw the next page and then draw the next page and we'll see what happens. I'm anticipating the third being a more, knock on wood, I'm anticipating the third being a more joyous creative experience, like a pleasurable, like, all right, I know this system, I know how to do this, I know I can do it, it's all going to be fine, let's have fun with this. That's the goal, at least, for the third one.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
For me, I don't know. I mean, I think maybe a little bit the opposite for me. I think the first one for me was a little more difficult just because I was trying to just pull out every trick because this is the first one. And when I first started writing it, you know, honestly, I mean, it was I set out to do a mini comic, you know, and it was supposed to only be 8 pages. And then
I don't know if I knew that. Have you taught? Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was part of the mini comic stump truck. It was supposed to only be 8 pages. And then, you know, and I figured, I'm going to just tell what's something simple. Oh, kids fighting zombies. That's easy enough. There's not much to that. And then as I started getting into it and messing around with these characters, I'm like, wait, there's something more here than just some kids fighting zombies. And then it became what it was. But I had already kind of, you know, had a basic idea, so I was sort of already into it by the time I realized, no, there's more to this. And at that point, I didn't really know how far I was going to go. But, you know, there is a little more. I know, like, you know, the neighborhood scene when they're coming down the hill, that first page, there's a lot of houses and stuff like that. And, and then I think, I don't know, it seems like it kind of alternates like from issue to issue. I think the second one was a little easier. The third one was a little harder because I was trying to do some more interesting things. Like I tried to do I don't know if I pulled it off or not, but I tried to do like an 80s montage in comic book form. Yeah. In a single page. So I did that. And that was kind of a struggle trying to figure that out. And then the last issue number 5 or 4, that was more kind of an action. It was pretty much all action. There wasn't a whole lot of, the issue 3, there was a lot of dialogue, a lot of exposition, and so I kind of wanted to break it up a little bit. And the last issue was a lot of action. Now it's getting to the point where it's kind of like both, where these next 2 issues, there's a lot going on, a lot of action, but also there's going to be a lot of explaining and exposition and things like that. So I don't know, it's kind of up and down, but the good thing is I think I've kind of, with this one, I kind of hit my stride, and kind of what Josh is talking about with the second issue or 2 stories, where the first one took him 5 years, and he's not expecting this one to take as long. I think I've got a good process with my, doing the digitally penciling, and then I'm inking traditionally, just so everything kind of matches up and everything. But it seems like I've got kind of a good pace, and even though I'm only really working on it like an hour a day, it seems like I'm making a lot of progress on it. So I don't know.
Remind me, how long ago did you start the first one?
I hate saying this because seriously, it's probably been about, I don't know, maybe 8 years or so. So I'm averaging every 2.
No, I believe it.
A basic 22-page comic book every 2 years I'm averaging. But I'm hoping that these next 2 issues won't take 2 years each. Maybe 1.
Right.
But it's a passion project. It's not like
that's what people who they're thinking about getting into comics, and I wouldn't turn anyone away. Like I love comics. Like I've done a lot of different creative things in my life, and I'm really enjoying this. But like it's a monster. Like I mean, you should know. But that's why I'm not surprised at all. I mean, I'm 2 in, and this has been, I don't know, 3 years so far or something like that. And I have plans for 4 more. It's horror. I try not to think about it, 'cause I don't know. Like it's always the next one.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna do 1 more. And then every time I've said like, all right, 1 more. But I hope Squatch isn't watching, because every time Squatchy hears me, he's like, you're doing all of them. But
I love I actually kind of agree with both of you. Like I also have joked about this, and I think Gary, you and I have joked about this, but it's like there's a certain comic amnesia, and I can tell you're already getting it a little bit. Good, because you're, it's like I almost feel like it's almost like women don't tend to remember childbirth.
Not
that it's birth. I mean, that's super painful, and I don't want to totally equate it, but you are kind of giving birth in a corny way to this thing you've invested all this time in and stuff. And
I'll just come right out and say it. You can flame me. Comics are way worse. Like, I mean, you're pregnant for 9 months. I worked on a comic for 2 years.
Totally.
Down. Yeah.
But I think it is similar, like psychologically, to that, where creators who are continuing to do this thing, I actually think we do need a little bit, at least I've noticed in myself and in other creators, that we tend to have this little bit of amnesia where it's like once it gets to print, there's this part of us that, like, for me, like even working on the second book, where I'm just like, the next one's not going to take me 5 years. Like I'm gonna work it out, and it'll be better this time. And it's almost like this abusive relationship where I like the final result, but it is a very abusive relationship.
Oh, the other comparison I make all the time is, it's a little bit like you get a hit off of, like, it's just awful. Like, I mean, the toil of it is tough. Like, it can be really grueling. But when that print version shows up and you can hold it in your hands and you can flip through it, and like all that work has finally come to this one moment where it's like, now I have a thing that other people can read, that other people can buy, that I can read. That gives you a hit that you'd end up chasing for, at least so far, I think that's what washes away a lot of it. You think, like, I want that experience again. Like, I want that experience of, like, now I have 3 comics. Now I have 4 comics. Like, that's, that's what you're in it for. the actual toil of it. I remember when I was a freelance game journalist, and I interviewed, gosh, I feel terrible. I'm blanking on his name right now, but it's because I'm tired. The guy who did the art, David Hellman. He did the art for the video game Braid. And I interviewed him, and I was very impressed with the art in this game. So I did a really in-depth interview with him, and I wanted to know everything, like, when did you start drawing? What were you drawing? Did you go to art school? Tell me about art school. Like, I wanted to get all of it. It was this like 4-part interview with a video game artist, but I was a freelancer. I could write whatever I wanted. But I remember I was like, what's something you got out of art school that you thought was the most valuable? And I didn't know if he would talk about color theory or I didn't know what he would talk about. And he was like, it helped me to be surrounded by other artists and realize that there's a suffering with doing great work. Like, if you really are pushing, it's going to hurt. And that wasn't, if I hadn't seen that, I might have felt like I must be doing it wrong. Or that it shouldn't hurt, or something like that. Like, no. But seeing that, that's how you end up with something kind of amazing and kind of great, is if you push yourself. Yeah. It was good for me to see that, and gave me permission to do it myself. And I thought about that a lot when I'm drawing a comic, where it's like, this is maybe, this is what he was talking about. This is the suffering. This is the hard part.
Yeah, 100%. And it's great when you've kind of at least one of the things that gets easier, and I think we got to wrap it pretty soon. Yeah. We're at an hour and 30. But one of the things that gets easier that I was kind of referencing too is also your life, in the sense of when I first started my first comic, I was surrounded by a lot of people, some who were really toxic and couldn't understand me being like, I'm not going to a party. Keep in mind, during COVID, this is not really a huge concern. But as a young man, when I was in my 20s, and it's I remember just having friends who were like, we're going to a bar, we're going to party. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to sit at home with a bristle board and ink for 5 hours, and then sleep, and then ink for 5 more. And they're like, well, why not hang out? And it's because this thing has to get done. Right. And I have way less of that in my life now, where it's I have a lot of, at this point in my life, most of my friends and family are on board and know what I'm doing. Yeah. And so they're willing to kind of understand, hey, I have this time carved, or this is why I'm sleeping 5 hours a night, as opposed to, and having that support base also changes as you do comics, because naturally, if you continue doing them, you kind of have to cut or modify people around you to
just build that muscle. I'm a Joseph Campbell geek, and to me, that's one of the first, if you decide to be a creative, that's one of the first trials you're going to face. That's the temptation off the path. You're going to say, whatever you're doing, I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to draw a comic. I'm going to learn how to play the guitar. The day after you make that decision, someone's going to we're going out tonight, and you have, now this is your test, man. Are you into this or not? Are you going to say no? Or are you going to be oh, okay. And then the New Year's resolution goes down the toilet. That, if you can't surmount that first obstacle, it's not going to happen. It's only going to get way harder after this, but you need to be able to say, this is important to me, and I'm carving out time for it. Yep. Period. And everyone needs to understand.
Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, just as a little spoiler, for those of you who write memoir, you're also going to face that with the people you're writing about. When you're writing about people, they're all about art and free expression, and suddenly you have a lot of uncomfortable conversations that are really important to have, because they're going to have published work that might mention them. And so it's that's having supportive people. It becomes so fundamental with art, and especially the truer your art gets, the more that really gets tested in the fire.
It's funny that never occurred to me with your book, but now I'm just wow, that would have been, that's daunting.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, because I always, when I've read your stuff, I've always thought about the courage it would take to tell these stories about yourself. It never even, and I was so stuck on that, I didn't even think about like all the other people who are showing up in this.
Yeah. And they signed off. So I mean, but the cool thing is like once again, it really I can't reinforce what you're saying more. I think that's really important.
Wow.
I love it. Oh, and Mama Soto was actually earlier. There's been some really cool chats going on, but she was actually asking in the chats about some suggestions for like somebody who wants to get started. And I think she's a graphic designer and illustrator who has interest in doing comics, and that's a really good point. Like, actually, that's probably the first piece of advice, which is do it. And if you don't do it today, you're probably not going to do it tomorrow.
Just start.
I'll give my number one advice.
I think there's a guy on this video right now who has a whole series of how to make comic videos. Oh, yeah. I don't remember who that was.
Some guy in a lab coat, definitely. Yeah, this guy in the center.
Some guy on YouTube who did a whole series of videos on that. Like,
yeah, he's usually in an underground lair, though. So.
Yeah. Something like that.
Mama Soto, if you want to check out my series, Making Comics 101, it's kind of basically takes you step by step through making comics. But the first thing I recommend to anyone who is thinking about starting a comic is start small. Start with like a 4-pager or at the most an 8-pager, but start with like a 4-pager. And you know, because too many people bite off way more than they can chew, or they've got these, you know, they want to do this massive, you know, epic story and everything, and you can get to that, or you know, you can do what I do, whereas instead of, you know, the only reason why I'm putting out single issues is because, you know, even though I know I want to tell a full story, like a 200 or 300 page story, it'll be 3, I don't know how many pages, but upwards of 300-400 pages when I'm done. But I didn't start off like that because I knew I'd never get it done if I had this big thing hanging over my head, like, oh man, I can't believe I'm only like a third of the way, or not. I mean, like an eighth of the way, whatever. You know, it's just there's so much, so far to go. But if you just start with a simple story, and you can build off of that too. But or if you have, and then if the people that do have like this larger idea in mind, just take a section of that and do like a small like prequel or just introduction, a scene from that. And then if you want, you can you know, build off of that or whatever, but start small. That's the number one advice I give everyone.
That's great.
Scott's videos are great and very useful. I would say, and I think we would all agree, you know, if you want to learn how to swim, you got to just kind of get in the pool and paddle around. If you want to learn how to ride a bike, you got to get on a bike. If you want to learn how to cook, you need to do some cooking. Like if you want to learn how to do comics, I would say start with a mini comic. Figure out just like some little story you want to tell. Like, and you just got to start doing it. You got to fail. You got to skin your knees. You got to, you know, but that's how you're going to learn. You can't think your way to being ready to do it. You have to just wade in.
Yeah, and I actually agree with that, because it's funny. I've been kind of the guy who's just dive in the deep end and make the thing you want to make, because inevitably you're going to put more effort into that. But thinking about it more and more, it's like I had this dream when I was doing t-shirt art of like doing comics as t-shirts, and so I did these single 1-page comics as shirt designs. But I would actually recommend do a poster comic. Like before even getting into a mini, just do like a poster comic. Do like an 11x17, 1 page. Maybe limit yourself to like 20 panels. Don't go over 20. Probably try to stick to like a very limited amount. But design the page. Do custom type. Like make sure there's dialogue in there so you get some word bubble.
A little of everything, yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely think like mini comic, poster page, like just have a project with an end goal that you can print. But yeah, like maybe it's 1 page. Like 1 page might not be a bad, because I think Scott's right. Like when you start small, like you'll start seeing all the problems you're going to have to solve when you work bigger.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately, I don't know about you guys, but when it comes to like doing a book, you make. This sounds so glib. It sounds like a stupid fortune cookie thing to say, but like the comic gets a page at a time. It's a panel at a time. Like you're making. You have to. If you're thinking about your whole story, like it's overwhelming. It's too much. I see Frank is blowing up the. How many kids will make comics? Oh, that's right. Yeah, wasn't there something about a starter kit, a comic maker kit? I remember there was something on YouTube who was selling like some sort of software. I don't remember. Somebody in
an underground lair with like a lab coat, and
was it that same?
It's so nice, I don't mind pitching my own stuff, but it's so nice when other people do it. So.
All right. And I saw Frank asking about stickers. Frank, if you want stickers, I'll send you stickers.
I love it. I love this conversation. I think we've gotten some really good thing. I also like this comic and an infographic. That's a good call. So do an infographic poster.
Yeah, graphic.
As a sequential story. Also, like if you're going to tell long sequential stories, whatever you pick, make sure you're having to show a character a few times, because that's a really good sign of whether comics are for you or not. There are some people who are like built to be illustrators, and there are some people who like love illustration who would hate comics because they don't like redrawing the same character. And a lot of comics are like taking a character and showing them behind the character and above the character and like floating them all over the place in space. So if you don't want to sit with the same character for a long time, comics may not be your jam.
I'm sure there's lots of things not to spend time on, but the one that just is popping in my head for some reason, like don't spend months or years on world building.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be
Tolkien trap.
Yeah, first of all, you could spend forever on that. Like don't write the Silmarillion or whatever for, this thing that you're never going to draw. Like do what they're saying. Start with the fundamentals. Play with panels. Figure out what a page layout might look like. Draw your character. Cobble something. Even if you don't want to do like a mini story, tell one page of your comic, or something like that. Try and just see how that goes. But yeah, don't spend a lot of time where it's like, writing 8 pages of backstory on something. Stop it.
And if you're tempted to do that, before that, maybe just do a story about what happened to you today that was interesting. Like it doesn't have to be complicated. It could literally be Mama Soto, I think you live in Texas, so it's like what just happened in Texas. That would be a great little one pager. It's like, hey, here's what I did the day the power went off, how we survived.
That's a great idea. Just a little autobiographical, like some story from your life. Something
it doesn't have to be complex, So
I just want to respond to Robert's comment. No, you can't hire me to make your comics. I have a hard enough time making my own comics.
You can hire Scott to make comics. It's just you better be willing to pay like illustration rates, not comic rates.
That's right.
Scott's work. All right. Okay. So let's see. Did we kind of? I think we hit the topic. I think we gave
all around the topic.
These are the topics I love. Anytime you get real nerdy and geeky on comics.
Well, and I love being able to talk about. There's not many people you can talk about just the craft of making a comic with.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. If you guys like what Gary was talking about, I just cannot reiterate enough. I know Scott fully endorses these too. Like we love these comics. Like legitimately, if I didn't know Gary, I'd still be obsessed with them. They're great. So go pick those up. The link is in the show notes. I'll go ahead and throw that up too. Boom. Etsy shop Dinosaurs versus Marsbots. Before you do anything today, go do that.
Wow. Thank you so much.
What else can people check out? Like they should probably check out your Instagram. Anything else?
Check out my Instagram. Yeah, Instagram. It's Dinosaurs versus Marsbots. Dinosaurs vs Marsbots. Check out my YouTube. It's Gary Hodges. You'll know it's me because the thumbnail is a little tyrannosaur eating an alien. I have lots of videos on the making of both 75 and 97, like step by step, just in a lot of detail, excruciating detail. And especially 97, I think it'd be very helpful. It'll show people more like every little step and what goes into it. And then, yeah, the Etsy shop. Those are the three big things.
Right. And Robert Johnson has mentioned that you look like Keanu Reeves like 40 times in the chats. So
I'll take it. I mean, sure. Hey, you know, that works. Yeah.
Yeah. That's better than the occasional Steve Buscemi that I've gotten, which is not.
That is not. First of all, I don't even see that. And second, no one should be calling anybody other than Steve Buscemi. Yeah. No one should be saying that you look like Steve Buscemi.
The ones I get all the time are Jon Favreau and Mark Ruffalo.
Wow, I didn't, Jon Favreau, but now I sort of, yeah.
I can see that you're like a hybrid kind of.
It is, yeah. You're like if you had like a morph program and could like what they look like. I don't see the Keanu Reeves thing at all, but sure. I think it's just the hair and like the John Wick look. I don't know what they're, This is all going away once I get vaccinated, by the way. That's the excuse. It's like, I
think you should just, here's the thing. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but this beard is getting fairly longer. And
I like how it comes to a point. I was looking at that and I'm like, that'd be a good caricature. Do Josh as a caricature.
It's getting a little weird, but I kind of like it. And I got to get over the weird because I've grown my hair long before, which I admire that you've gotten over the weird. Because the problem with growing your hair out is there's always this little mid phase where it's really weird and it's going to stick out in weird directions.
Yeah.
And that's where my beard's at. It's at this weird phase where like this little point is going to kind of move all over the place. But if I can outlast that, then I can full ZZ top this business.
I have to say, like,
they got about 30 years ahead of you.
The way you talk about Chris Ware, how like you'll read him and just like, how dare this guy? Like, yeah, that's how I feel about your facial hair.
Oh, thank you.
I am so offended by how good it is and thick. Like it's like a personal affront. I wish I could do what you're doing. That's pretty cool.
Well, you're getting there.
no, this is as good as it gets, man. Like this is it. This is like I would look like a hillbilly or something if I grew it out. It would be bad.
I love it. Oh, miss when my screen would go smoke. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I missed that too. All right. Well, so I think we're good. Thanks to everybody in the chats. We had a really lively chat.
Oh, cool. I'm looking forward to reading it later. So.
Oh my gosh. Somebody told me I look like General Zod. That's awesome.
That's not bad. That's way better than Steve Buscemi.
I'm going to defeat Superman. That's what I'm going to do.
Kneel.
Exactly. Kneel before Zod. All right. Yeah. So, I forgot. Scott, where can everybody find your work and where?
Well, don't look for my work, but you look for Josh's work on my website. This is the print that Josh did for me for my birthday. There are very, very limited quantities available on my website. If you want to pick up one, go to circworks.com and check that out. I just uploaded those today, so they're available now. And also, so this show that we do, the Artcasters, we do this show every single week, usually on a Thursday, usually around 9 p.m. Pacific time is when we go live. Of course, you can watch it after the fact. But if you want to know when we go live, if you want to know whose channel it's on, because it also switches back and forth from Josh's channel to my channel, we always have a different guest. Today we got Gary. Next week it'll be somebody else. If you want to know all that information, where, who, what, when, join our mailing list. There's a link in the description of this video. We don't spam you or anything like that. We just usually about 30 minutes before we go live, we send out a link and it will give you all that information and you'll know exactly where to click because YouTube doesn't always notify people. So check that out.
Sweet. All right. Thanks, guys, and we will see you next week. Bye.
See ya.